The title of this story is Poor Baby. This is one of my father's stories, but it's so amazing that I just couldn't resist including it in my book. Since I wasn't there, and my father's not around to tell his story, I'm going to try to tell it as flamboyantly as he did. My father's business partner, Rob, had a sailboat. This may sound glamorous, but it was only 21 feet long. Rob was a fair-weather sailor who enjoyed cruising his sailboat around the harbor and staying close to shore. One beautiful summer morning in 1973, my father and Rob heard a jingle on the radio advertising Catalina as the island of romance. When they heard it was only 26 miles across the sea, they figured they could make it in their rinky-dink boats. Unable to contain their excitement, they simultaneously blurted out, "What are we waiting for?" The conditions in the channel that day were perfect. Clear skies, light breeze, and calm waters. Rob set sail for Catalina in his little sailboat, while my father motored along in his 14-foot poor man's ski boat, Baby. Rob's sailboat was a lot slower than Baby, so my father started amusing himself by racing around Rob to catch air off the small waves. When he got bored of that, he started running circles around the other sailboats in the channel. By the time they got to Catalina Island, the sun was going down. They stopped at the entrance to Avalon Bay so Rob could take down his sails and motor into the bay. As Rob was boasting about his sailing skills, he yanked the pull start cord on his outboard motor. To his surprise, the motor jumped off the mount and fell right into the water. Fortunately, Rob was still holding onto the cord, but his motor was completely submerged in salt water. Hauling his drenched motor back on deck, Rob embarrassingly explained, "I must have forgotten to tighten the mounts." My father teased, "Is that one of your great sailing techniques, Rob?" Since Rob's boat was now dead in the water, my father towed him to their mooring. My father and Rob were enjoying the Catalina nightlife so much, they decided to stick around a few days, but they were oblivious to the storm headed their way. The morning they were leaving, ominous storm clouds loomed overhead. The sea was too rough for my father to drive Baby back to the mainland, so they tied her to the back of Rob's sailboat and headed toward the open sea. As they were leaving Avalon Bay, a harbor patrol officer pulled alongside and hailed them. "Ahoy! There is a small craft advisory in effect, and this storm is going to get a lot worse out in the channel. You are advised to turn back." My father replied, "Thanks for the warning, but we got an important meeting back on the mainland tomorrow. We're going to brave the storm." The harbor patrol officer scolded them. "I can't stop you, but be advised, your lives will be in serious jeopardy if you take those small craft into this storm." This made them pause for a moment, but instead of turning back, they battened down the hatches and headed into the storm. As they left the safety of Avalon Bay, a strong easterly wind filled the sails of their little boat, and Rob yelled out with a giddy optimism, "This wind is propelling us faster than I've ever been in this boat. If it keeps up, we might just outrun this storm." With Baby in tow, they sailed out ahead of the storm, armed with nothing but their foolish optimism and a single-minded determination to attend that meeting. Less than halfway across the channel, the full force of the storm descended upon them. Rain was now falling out of the sky as if it were being dumped out of buckets. Gale-force winds were battering the sails, and the mast looked like it was about to fold any second. The turbulent storm waters were tossing their little boats around like toys in a washing machine, and Baby's tow rope kept howling in distress every time it cut through the huge waves that separated them. The chilling reality of the storm had finally ripped the last shred of foolish optimism out of their souls. Regret doesn't even begin to describe the hopeless terror that had overtaken them, because Rob was an inexperienced sailor, and my father had no experience as a first mate. They had no choice but to suffer the wind and rain while Rob relentlessly manned the tiny tiller at the back of the boat. As Rob was barking out orders, he saw the fear in my father's eyes. With an authoritative voice, Rob barked out, "Fear isn't an option! One of the rigging lines is snagged and I need you to take the tiller while I unsnag it! My father took the tiller as Rob precariously walked along the deck looking for the snag. Aha! He exclaimed, then knelt down to unsnag the rigging without realizing the wind had shifted. As he stood up, the wind swung the sail to Rob's side of the boat, taking him with it. Rob was now clinging to the boom with his legs dangling over the ocean. He screamed out to my father, "Pull me in!" My father panicked when he realized, if Rob falls in the ocean, I don't know how to turn this boat around to save him. My father frantically asked, "Which rope do I pull?" Rob was far too busy hanging on for dear life to think about which rope to pull, so he shouted, "Figure it out!" My father couldn't take his hand off the tiller, so with his free hand he started pulling ropes until Rob and the boom were once again over the deck. Once back on deck, Rob took control of the tiller and said, "We better put on some life vests and tether ourselves to the mast so we don't get swept overboard." The storm raged on as they tried to navigate with only a compass and their foolish optimism. About an hour later, Rob spotted a huge rogue wave and bellowed, "Brace yourself!" The little sailboat stalled and heaved up several feet as they plowed through the wave. They felt themselves picking up speed as they descended down the other side. Baby's tow rope began to howl as it cut through the wave that separated them. They both panicked when they realized that wave's gonna stop Baby dead in her tracks, and we're picking up speed. They turned their attention to the tow rope and watched it stretch. They couldn't see Baby, but they knew she just plowed into that wave. Without warning, the tow rope snapped. My father panicked. "We've got to turn around and save Baby!" Rob protested. "We can't risk it!" Just then, my father spotted Baby as she popped out of the mountainous valley of waves concealing her. My father screamed in desperation, "If you don't stop this boat, I'm gonna jump in and swim to her!" Rob reluctantly turned the sailboat around so they could start searching for Baby. It was like playing whack-a-mole in the ocean as Baby popped up, then disappeared. By some miracle, they ended up next to her, and my father jumped onto her bow with their end of the tow rope tied around his waist. As he grabbed Baby's end of the tow rope, another wave washed him off the bow and into the ocean. He used Baby's end of the tow rope to haul himself back up onto her bow, then jumped into the driver's seat. He was desperately trying to tie the tow rope back together as both boats were being battered by the storm. When he finally got the tow rope tied back together, he felt the water at the bottom of Baby surging back and forth across his calves. He shouted over to Rob, "Baby's gonna sink if I don't bail her out! Throw me a bucket!" Rob tossed him a bucket and he proceeded to bail the water out of Baby. It seemed like the storm was throwing one bucket in for every two he threw out. He finally got her bailed out and yelled to Rob, "I've got a riding Baby to keep her bailed out!" Rob set sail and pushed on through the storm with Baby and my father in tow. The tow rope kept pulling Baby's bow down as she plowed through the waves that were swamping her. My father kept bailing her out, but it seemed like a losing battle. Without warning, the tow rope snapped again. Rob kept going, so my father started Baby's outboard motor to catch him. Now it was a game of whack-a-mole in reverse, because my father had to wait for the sailboat to pop up, then race over, hoping it didn't disappear again. This happened several more times, then a terrifying thought entered my father's head. What if Baby doesn't starve next time? I'll be lost at sea! Panic wasn't an option, so he did the only thing he could, continue bailing, keep that terrifying thought out of his head. The realization that they were hopelessly lost finally sunk in, and their only choice was to head east, hoping the mainland would appear soon. The ocean was pitch black, so they knew night had fallen upon them like an unwelcome blindfold. The darkness was now concealing the dangerous waves that were once visible, and the fear of being capsized was added to the long list of fears that were already haunting them. The light on their compass began to dim, along with their hope of survival. Both men were desperately in need of an encouraging sign that the mainland was within their grasp. They were cold, wet, hungry, and exhausted because the relentless storm had pushed them far beyond their limits. Neither man was religious, but they were praying for a miracle. Between prayers, they cursed the darkness without realizing it would be their salvation. The storm started to subside, and the mainland lights finally pierced through the storm like pinholes in a black canvas. Their spirits took flight because this was the sign they needed. They were no longer guided by foolish optimism or even a compass. They had the lights of the mainland to guide them home. As they drew closer, Rob couldn't believe his eyes. He was looking at the lights of Newport Beach. By some miracle, the storm had brought them home. Outwardly, they were wet, cold, and exhausted, but inwardly they were celebrating as if God Himself had answered their prayers. As they entered the harbor, the rain stopped, the wind subsided, and the ocean calmed as if Mother Nature was rewarding them for passing her test. The familiar sights of Newport Bay that they had always taken for granted were now the most beautiful things they had ever seen. My father hooked the tow rope to Rob's sailboat and motored them past Corona del Mar, the Balboa Fun Zone, Lido Island, and right up to the launch ramp they started from a few days earlier. Once they'd moored both boats, my father lay motionless on the dock and let out a sigh of relief. He asked Rob, "Do you feel that?" In an exhausted voice, Rob replied, "Feel what?" My father chuckled and said, "Exactly! It's not moving!" Rob walked over, laid next to my father, then asked, "How you feeling?" With a laugh, my father said, "I feel like a little boy who's been spanked by Mother Nature for defying her, then sent to bed without supper. Since she's already spanked us, we should go to bed without supper, just to let her know we're sorry." As amazing as it seems, they were both lying there laughing about their adventure and basking in the joy of just being alive. As they were getting ready for their meeting the next morning, they got a phone call from a woman with a southern drawl. "Mr. Skura, the banker you're meeting with today was called away on business and he'll be out of town for a few days. Can we reschedule your meeting for next week?" My father shuddered. Sure, why not? It's not like anyone risked their life to attend this meeting." From then on, my father and Rob always double-checked and sometimes triple-checked the weather before taking Rob's sailboat to Catalina, and they never took baby with them again. However, they neglected to protect baby from me when they sailed to Catalina, and that's the subject of the sink or swim story in the next chapter. So, there you have it. If you've ever wondered where I got my spirit of adventure from, now you know.
How did you arrange the sound effects?
What's that?
How did you arrange the sound effects?
I just called the
We heard the
weatherman and he
storm.
brought him in for me.
Yeah, I tell you.
Outside, storm, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be gone by the time you go outside. He promised me it would be gone.
Next time we have a reading, I hope you bring the video with the waves and the
Oh,
the lightning. and
So that's
stuff.
part of a preview.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do that, you know, can't wait to see that one. Well, here's the fact, that's a hard act to follow. Anybody wanted to volunteer to follow that terrific story? Okay, come on up, Bruce. And so when's your next book coming out there?